is summarized in the one commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Hear, Lord, our prayer and grant your mercies, because we call upon you in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, our ceremony commences with formalities that record the contribution of the public service in the reading of the citation to public servants given by the Honorable Minister with responsibility for finance and the public service, and the reading of the proclamation given by His Excellency, the Governor-General, on the occasion of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards 2022. First, the citation will be read by Mr. O'Neill Grant, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, who is now invited to read the citation and thereafter make a symbolic presentation to His Excellency, the Governor-General. Please welcome Mr. O'Neill Grant.
Your Excellency, Governor-General Sir Patrick Allen, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Minister Nigel Clark, Minister of State and the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Marshall Smith, Ambassador, the Honorable Douglas Saunders, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, Member of Parliament representing the Leader of the Opposition, Members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Cadre of Permanent Secretaries, heads of ministries, departments, and agencies. It gives me honor to read the citation for Civil Service Week 2022. And before I do so, let me also recognize the awardees and those who have come to support them. In recognition and appreciation of your faithful service and invaluable contribution as public servants to the government of Jamaica. Today, on the occasion of the 2022 Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards ceremony, we honor some 600 public sector workers who are the embodiment of the theme, the special theme for Civil Service Week, the public sector forging ahead with determination. With determination, the public sector provides support to our elected legislator in the mission of creating a better society for all citizens of our nation. With determination, our public servants are employing research and analysis to transform our legacy institutions so that they will continue to benefit future generations of Jamaicans. With determination, the expertise of public servants working within the financial services have protected Jamaican families from inflation extremes, cognizant of lessons from the past when the cost and availability of imported essential commodities were affected by wars, political unrest in oil-producing states, and extreme weather events. Our technocrats addressed supply chain disruptions and economic fallout with proposals for fiscal measures to protect the price of goods. Their actions help to modernize the management of our treasury to mitigate against the impact of significant periods of global recession. The public sector was essential to keeping the economy moving. With determination, the public sector became the face of the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring the availability of medicine and services to underpin Jamaica's recovery. It is more and more evident that the government policies that impact social well-being, particularly in legal, health, and housing protection, have been rolled out in the public sector, duly reoriented to place the family unit at the center of policy. The reformation has been technologically driven to reduce the digital divide in accessing public services. Our public servants, thus, are the gatekeepers of an evolving service edifice that, including the Registrar General's Department and the National Identification System Interface, will facilitate efficient birth registration, education, health and justice systems interventions, and the seamless identification process that is the birthright of every citizen. With determination, the public sector supported the nurturing and global elevation of our cultural and sports disciplines. As Jamaicans, especially our intrepid youth, embrace these calls to participate in the highest levels of international competition, they could depend on the official cultural and diplomatic channels that serve as conduits for our emissaries to soar and shine and showcase their talents on fields and stages around the world. The Jamaican nation, rooted in the diversity and the genius of her people, has faced many challenges in the past 25 years. The 2022 awardees we honor for that length of service have not benefited from any special exemptions from these challenges, but instead, their efforts have been critical to the creation of solutions. Our dependable stewards have not resiled from supporting systemic reviews that ensure responsibility and graduate into improved systems of accountability in how the state manages resources and coordinates its response to national or community crises. During this, the Diamond Jubilee of our independence, we recognize how, time and again, the public sector has not only reignited our nation through times of struggle, but has acted as a beacon, leading the way for the nation to forge forward, onward together with determination. This citation documents your honorable service, and for my hand today, I commend it. I now present the citation to His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen.
We will now invite His Excellency, the Governor-General, to accept the symbolic presentation of the citation. And that was done. We apologize. The mic went to sleep a short while ago. Thank you, Your Excellency and Mr. O'Neill Grant. The presentation of the citation from the Minister is followed by the presence of the Minister himself, as we invite Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, to deliver his welcome remarks. Welcome him for me.
His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor-General of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, representing the Leader of the Opposition, colleague members of the Cabinet, Ministers of State, the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards, Ambassador Douglas Saunders, Mr. O'Neill Grant, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, permanent secretaries, members of awardees, and members of the civil service, good afternoon. Let me begin by welcoming you to this year's staging of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards, designed for public servants who have given service to Jamaica in the region of 25 years and more. Every year we gather to celebrate the triumphs of our civil service, and this year is no different. We missed due to the COVID pandemic. And it's so good to be able to resume. These awardees and our civil service at large have committed and continue to commit to continuously improving the efficiency of the public service which they provide. And as we continue to evolve using technology and embracing the general shift in how business is conducted, we continue to require and lean on meaningful partnerships with and within various ministries, departments, and agencies to truly achieve the vision of a transformed public sector. The COVID-19 pandemic provided uncharted territory for government. Elected officials and public service leaders around the world have had to make profound decisions with no precedent to draw upon and little certainty around when the crisis would have ended. But we can be proud of the fact that the public service in Jamaica responded in scale and with a pace appropriate to tackle the crisis effectively. And in so doing, we have learned, certainly the society has learned what we always knew, that the public service of Jamaica is world-class and built with resilience. Civil servants and public sector employees have demonstrated their vocation to society in their efforts and response to the huge demands placed on you on a daily basis. Public servants have prioritized the co-creation of continuously moving for the public good. Governments have been forced to be faster and more effective and to engage with a diverse and competitive range of stakeholders and to take on unusual levels of risk and uncertainty. These are three of the core abilities required of digital, adaptive, and resilient institutions. We continue to work together, among other things, to re-engineer processes to reduce duplication and waste in the public sector, to overhaul and to revamp the compensation system in the public sector, for which we have made very good and steady progress. And a little birdie said to me that members of the public service attached to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service are working assiduously with ministries, departments, and agencies to ensure that December is one to remember. But you notice I said working with ministries, departments, and agencies. So just make sure the persons in the payroll department in your particular ministry provides the information that is required for this to take place. But I reached number 2 and it looked like the meeting done. So that was number 2, overhauling the compensation system to ensure that we can continue to attract and retain the kind of talent that we need to run the public bureaucracy. And the third is implementing shared services to improve the delivery of key services. We want to continue to develop a strong reputation for our civil service as world-class and promote its consistent ability to deliver a high standard of public services across the country. To maintain this standing, we must constantly strive to improve systems, drive efficiency, and think innovatively. The Civil Service Awards celebrate the very best of the civil service, enabling the sharing of best practice right across government departments. Thanks to the dedication of government employees who are striving to make things better for everyone. from top management to frontline staff. This transformation is now a reality, and it has only just begun. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards ceremony, and thank you for sharing in the achievements of these hardworking and dedicated Jamaicans. Thank you.
And thank you too, Mr. Minister. It is now my privilege to read the proclamation given by His Excellency the Governor General for the 2022 Long Service Awards ceremony. A proclamation by His Excellency the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Linton Allen, Member of the Order of the Nation, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, Commander of the Order of Distinction, Knight of Grace of the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Governor General of Jamaica. Whereas many public officers have rendered long years of service of Jamaica, and whereas in recognition of that service, it is considered fitting to honor the persons who by their service over the years have contributed to the nation's development. And whereas the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Award Rules 1988, as amended in 1993, provide for the making of annual awards to public officers who at the first day of April in each year have completed such period of service, not being less than 25 years, as the minister responsible for the public service may determine, and have not previously been awarded a medal pursuant to those rules. Now therefore I, Patrick Linton Allen, Member of the Order of the Nation, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, Commander of the Order of Distinction, Knight of Grace of the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Governor General of Jamaica, do hereby proclaim and make known that I hereby approve the award of long service medals to all public officers who, at the first day of April 2022, have completed 25 years or more and have not previously been awarded a medal. Given under my hand and the broad seal of Jamaica at King's House, this 28th day of February in the year of our Lord, 2022, and the 71st year of the reign of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2022 Proclamation. As we continue, firefighter Delroy Nelson has been singing since 2005 while he was attending Happy Grove High School in Portland. He joined the Jamaica Fire Brigade in 2015. Because of his love for singing, he has become a member of the Jamaica Fire Brigade Choir. He also sings with a local band in St. Thomas, where he resides. Help me then welcome firefighter Delroy Nelson from the Jamaica Fire Brigade singing Wind Beneath My Wings.
All protocols observed.
Covers PH.
It must have been cold here in my shadows to never find some light on your face, but you were content to let me shine. That's your way. You
Microphone. Thank you very much. It doesn't come any better. Please give another nice round of applause to firefighter Delroy Nelson from the Jamaica Fire Brigade singing Wind Beneath My Wings. Thank you for that performance, Mr. Nelson. We now invite His Excellency, the Governor General, to make the presentations to the first cohort of recipients. The Governor General is attended by Major Dwayne Hill, aide-de-camp. His Excellency will now come forward.
The first recipient will be from the Office of His Excellency the Governor General and staff, Mr. O'Neill Anthony Hamilton. The next recipient is from the Office of the Cabinet, Miss Yvonne May McLeod. The following two recipients are from the Office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Adrian Dale Booth. Mr. Gilbert Anthony Randall. The following recipients are from the Department of Correctional Services. Mrs. Barbara Allen White. Mr. Michael O'Brien Brown. Mrs. Marcia Anne-Marie Clark Chang. Mr. Adrian, we'll read that again, Mr. Abraham Anthony Ellis. Miss Claudette Maxine Hamilton. Mrs. Suzette Hill McFarlane. Miss Marie Angela MacDonald. Miss Evadne Olivia Palmer. Mrs. Cicely Angelo Scarlett Wallace. Miss Evadne Antoinette Shaw. The Reverend Ellen Hyacinth Thomas. The following recipient is from the Houses of Parliament. Mr. Harvey Andrew da Costa. The following recipients are from the Institute of Jamaica. Miss Constance Autherine Dunkley. Mr. Bernard Gordon Christopher Janke. Miss Roxanne Marie Silent. From the Jamaica Library Service, Mrs. Mitchell Barnes-Pitter. Miss Audlette Patricia Blagrove. Mr. Junior Georgia Clark. Mr. Leonardo Homar Edgehill. Miss Andrea Denise Franklin. Miss Anika James. Mrs. Carisha Daniela Lewis Gordon. Miss Sharon Elaine McQueen. Miss Opal Marie Scott. Mrs. Carleen Hortensia Tate. Mr. Sean Alban Thomas. Announcing recipients from the Post and Telecommunication Department, starting with Miss Risha Kayan Bent. Miss Carleen Jennifer Brown. Mrs. Marie Dahlia Carter Robbins. Mrs. Curleen Marvany Clark. Mrs. Pollyanna Marie Cousins. Miss Daphne Elaine Davidson. Mrs. Elise Vestalda Freeman, Miss Fiona Shireen Grant, Miss Lola Victoria Harris, Mrs. Julene Angela Henry Ferron, Mrs. Darlene Heatherdawn Hunter-Gordon, Mrs. Tracy Ann Amoy Lee, Mrs. Petrina Sylvia McFarlane Henry, Miss R.G. Almeria Nooks, Mr. Alfred Donovan Ramsey, Mrs. Alcia Nicola Riley, Miss Dorrit May Sharp, Mrs. Sonia Antoinette Slater Bryan, Mr. Errol Smith, Ms. Hazel Amanda Stewart, Mrs. Joy Lamalita Stewart, Mrs. Melrose Michelle Sylvester, Miss Georgia Phyllis Williams, announcing recipients from Tax Administration, Jamaica, Miss Sidonie Amoy Abrams, Miss Vanisha Veronica Bennett, Miss Norisha Dornette Brown, Mr. Ricardo Orlando Campbell, Mrs. Susan Melissa Christy Mundell, Mrs. Sophia Tracy Ann Davis Johnson, Mrs. Anya Andrisha DePass, Mrs. Anne-Marie Nadine Ford Carr, Miss Fiona Antoinette Ebanks, announcing Miss Joan Foster. Mr. Andrew Dean Facey.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a nice round of applause for Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson, and congratulations to all our recipients. Thank you, Your Excellency. Give him a round of applause, please. Thank you. Now, the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band was formed in March 1958. The present bandmaster is Deputy Superintendent of Police, Doran McCarthy. The members of the band are all trained police officers, men and women, who also regularly join forces with their colleagues on the front line in the fight against crime and the maintenance of law and order. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a musical presentation from the members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Thank you. Thank you, Jamaica Constabulary Force Band, for that musical presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, to come forward. The Prime Minister will be attended by Deputy Superintendent of Police, Lawrence Ogilvie, aide-de-camp. Welcome him for me, please. Good afternoon to you, sir. Adjust it.
Continuing recipients from the Tax Administration, Jamaica, Ms. Camille Nicole Francis. Mrs. Suzette Simone Harriet Rogers. Mrs. Jacqueline Hyacinth Isaacs. Ms. Alicia Joy James. Mrs. Caroline Rosemary Jones Ferron. Mrs. Georgia Nicole Josephs. Mr. Gary George Knowles. Mrs. Jelaine Dion Lumsden Mandison. Ms. Irma Patricia McLeod. Mrs. Deisha Hyacinth Needham Barrett. Mrs. Michelle Roxanne Pinto Campbell. Miss Christine Anne-Marie Regent. Mrs. Shireen Alicia Rose. Ms. Nadine Yvonne Sinclair. Mrs. Tana May Smith. Ms. Bernadette Desmarie Tater. Mrs. Rimalee Charlene I'm sorry, she's coming up. That's Miss Tato. Miss Rika Samantha Stanley. Mr. Donovan Horace has passed, and so his wife, Carol Wellington, will be collecting on his behalf. Mr. Michael Donovan Williams. Mrs. Remily Charlene Wint Lewis. The following recipients are from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Mr. Bernard Lawrence Alexander Aitchison. Mrs. Bavette Faye Balfour. Mr. Roy Winston Barr. Mrs. Azra Patty and Blythe Mallet. Mr. Sylvester Christie. Mr. Delroy Lee Coley. Mrs. Scarlett Patrice Douglas. Ms. Charlene Natalie Findlay. Mrs. Delia Kildare Fletcher. Miss Yolanda Alicia Gibson. Miss Patricia Joan Graham. Mr. Dalton Washington Hastings. Miss Beverly Andrew Hyman. Mr. Ian Keith Jones. Miss Lorraine Bridget Muirhead. Dr. Lisa Raquel Simone Myers Morgan. Mr. Oral Ray Sr. Mrs. Michelle Antoinette Sherwood. Mr. Hugh Albert Smith. Miss Loy Anne-Marie Spencer. Miss Charlene Nicola Thomas. Mr. Kenrick George Williams. Recipients from the Ministry of Education and Youth, Mr. Milton Washington Brown. Mrs. Marva Emita Bryan Peterson, or Pattison rather. Miss Carol Andrea Coley. Mrs. Sandra Andrea Copeland Donaldson. Miss Joan St. Clair Davis. Mr. Garth Dwight Gilmore. Mrs. Marita Aldeline Hayden Innswood. Mrs. Anne-Marie Henry. Ms. Cheryl Rosemary Jackson. Mrs. Sharon Loretta Thomas Gabriel. Miss Jennifer Walters. The following recipients are from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Ms. Carol Maria Allen. Ms. Lorraine Andrea Bennett. Mrs. Colette Alicia Cummings McClawson. Mrs. Millicent Yvonne Martin James. Miss Jeline Queensbar. Mrs. Debbie Ann Marie Stewart Bonney. Mrs. Andrea Virginia Thomas Gale, Justice of the Peace. Mrs. Loy Jennings Walters. The following recipients are from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Mrs. Geraldine Marine Miles. Ambassador Janice Yvonne Miller. Now, the following recipients are from the Ministry of Health and Wellness Head Office. Dr. Melody Ennis. Mrs. Alicia Pamela Muir-Pitta. Miss Denise Angela Palmer. Miss Marsha Ann Palmer. Mrs. Melissa Parks Wisdom. Mr. Capel Wilbur Taylor. Mr. Ransford Wilkins. Miss Jennifer Williams. Recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Bellevue Hospital. Miss Yvette Vivine Francis. Miss Judith Gordon. And finally, Miss Sharon Montgomery.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and heartiest congratulations to our recipients. Thank you, Mr. Shivani Blair. Mrs. Nigen Brown is a graduate of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC, with a degree in tourism and hospitality management. She's a keen listener to opera singing and the discipline and creativity involved, and that has influenced her personal and professional pursuits. She's a member of the choir of the Andrews Memorial Seventh-day Adventist Church. She has performed at several events, and in particular, the annual Evening of Excellence held at the University Chapel. Ladies and gentlemen, performing The Impossible Dream, please help me welcome Mrs. Nijen Brown. Thunderous applause. Give it up again for Mrs. Nijen Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the representative of the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, to make the next set of presentations. Welcome her for me, please. The recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Northeastern Regional Health Authority. Up first, Mrs. Andrea Bell Shaw. Mrs. Janet Angela Bryan Dick. Mrs. Lucille Catherine Davis Orr. Mrs. Roslyn DeLissa. Miss Primrose Angela Edwards. Miss Claudette Marcia Ellis. Mr. Carl Anthony Hardware. Mrs. Cheryl Rose Harris Sterling. Welcome, please, Mrs. Paulette Sharon Henderson Graham. Mr. Michael Henry. Mrs. Yvonne Hibbert. Mrs. Andrea Jack Davis. Mrs. Elaine Jackson Webb. Mrs. Andrea Cheryl Kelly Johnson. Mrs. Jacinth Cassandra Lewis Bygrave. Miss Ava Simone Malcolm. Mrs. Julene Caron McKenzie. Julene Corona McKenzie. Miss Sylvia Morris. Miss Paulette Bernadette Nolan. Mrs. Claudia Pinnock Simmons. Ms. Jerlene Carrie-Ann Quidley. Mr. Garfield Oliver Boyd Ruby. Dr. Peter Scarlett. Mrs. Simonia Adina Slulong. Mrs. Rotelda Thompson. Mrs. Deborah Thompson Treasurer. Dr. Patrick Dale Wheatle. Miss Gracella Williams. Miss Paulette Williams. Miss Clara Wisdom. The next set of recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Southern Regional Health Authority. Mrs. Sharon Joy Bailey-Poyser. Mrs. Mavis Rebecca Channel. Mrs. Anne-Marie Codner. Mrs. Arlene Elena Ellis Bennett. Miss Lenice Linda Greenbaker. Mrs. Dottie Dean Johnson James. Mrs. Zine Layla. Miss Karen Yvonnette Law. Mrs. Sophia Lorraine Mackenzie Knight. Miss Nicole McLean. Mrs. Velma Morris Davis. Miss Nicole Sherrianne Pitter. Miss Maxine Annette Powell. Mrs. Rosina Powell. Mrs. Carol Reed. Mrs. Rosemary Jacqueline Rodney Limonius. Mrs. Claudia Angela Shaw-Bell. Mrs. Jennifer Smith-Williams. Mrs. Dotlin Juanita Thomas. Mr. Damani Orlando Turner. Miss Audrey White. Mr. Leon Robert Wiltshire. The following persons will be recipients from the Ministry of Health and Western Regional Health Authority. Mr. Odine Andrew Black. Mr. Carl Anthony Boyd. Mrs. Georgia Antoinette Boyd Blake. Mr. Garfield Fitzroy Cahoon. Miss Janet Davis. Thank you very much, Dr. Brown-Burke. And will we give the recipients a thunderous round of applause, please? Thank you, Dr. Brown. A little bit more entertainment. The police band's first public performance took place in November 1958 at Fort Charles in Port Royal. However, since its inception, the band has traveled thousands of miles, performing throughout the island in every parish, as well as in other Caribbean islands and the United States of America. Let us now welcome the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band for another performance. Give a round of applause, please, the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Who would recognize Buffalo Soldier? The next set of recipients will be presented by Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson. Welcome her for me, please. May I invite the Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clark, to come forward to make the various presentations. Welcome him heartily for me, please.
The following awardees are recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the Western Regional Health Authority. Ms. Donna Marie Dawkins. Mrs. Angela Marie Duncan. Ms. Sharon Marie Ewart-Ray. Mr. Rowan G. Grant. Mrs. Kerry Harris Callum. Mrs. Alita Myla Henry Dawkins. Mrs. Daphne Hilton Sterling. Mrs. Faith Lynn Lee Johnson Clark. Dr. Janet Marie Johnson Morris. Ms. Denise Dorothy Lee. Miss Camille Avery Rose Lewin. Mrs. Valerie Mannings Cole. Mrs. Gillian R. Mason Quarry. Miss Jennifer McGregor. Mr. Carlington G. McLennan. Mr. Dennis Glyniston Moody. Mr. Garth Lloyd Mott. Mrs. Ina Elizabeth Mullings Deer. Mr. Michael A. Reed. Mr. Ainsworth K. Samuels. Mrs. Sukana Natasha Samuels Francis. Mrs. Carol Maxine Smith Behari. Mrs. Genevieve Versiana Thompson. Miss Melody Spence. Mrs. Jacqueline Hillary Thompson Dixon. Mrs. Jacqueline Princess William Scott. Mrs. Marcia Maxine Williams Wignall. Miss Andira Ingrid Wright. Mr. Exdal A. Wright. Mrs. Annette Vedaline Wright-Bulgin. We are pleased to announce recipients from the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, starting with Mrs. Patricia Boyd Percy. Miss Antoinette Anne-Marie James. Mrs. Stain Selena Lane Marshall. Mrs. Tamara Anita Moore. Mrs. Sonia Eileen Rochester. Mrs. Tricia Tamara Tumagale. The following are recipients from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Miss Annette Althea Allen. Mr. Oral Claude Allen. Miss Millicent Urix Blair. Mr. Alric Ricardo Brown. Mrs. Andrea Nicole Campbell Francis. Mr. Devon Peter Elliott. Miss Ingrid Natoya Hibbert. Mrs. Dahlia Rodella Hilton Hessing. Miss Alethea Indiana Lewis. Mrs. Thressa Simone Mahon. Mr. Michael Anthony Miller. Mr. Bartholomew Chevan Redwood. Miss Tanya Elizabeth Riley. Mr. Dave Valentine Rose. Mrs. Faye Samuels. Mrs. Sharon Schloss Palmer. Mrs. Suzette Anne-Marie Schauter. Mrs. Natalie Nicole Stewart Gordon. Mrs. Lisa Adela Taylor Bennett. Mrs. Carlene Shernette Williams. Mrs. Dahlia Cecile Wright Wilson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nigel Clark. And thank you, Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson. Give them a round of applause for me, please. As we get ready for some more entertainment, Agent Sasco, who is foremost among Jamaica's celebrated musicians, revels in his creative independence. In the roles of artist and executive producer, Agent Sasco has delivered several masterpieces recorded at Diamond Studios, which he also owns and operates. I'm internally driven, not by external forces. That's what he declares. Humility and philanthropy are core principles that inspire Jeffrey Agent Sasko Campbell in his music and his personal life as a family man and a role model. Recently, Agent Sasko became a mentor in the We Transform Rehabilitation Program for young men in Kingston's Metcalfe Street Juvenile Center. He also partnered with the Environmental Solutions Limited project to harvest rainwater in his hometown of Kintyre. He has been recognized by the government of Jamaica with a national award, the Order of Distinction. Agent Sasko affirms that, and I quote, "My best work is ahead of me," as he maintains his objective to be a positive ambassador for his island and country, exporting and sharing his talent as his gift that keeps on giving. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Agent Sasko.
Church out no respect in all aspect. Why would I intro like that? Wow, I say, would I better than me rate him? Give thanks. Now, I want to say first of all, congratulations to all the awardees. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. Them say time is money, right? So we know time as one of our most precious commodities, and therefore, if you can give your time and give it for a long time, we say enough respect. Round of applause again. And right about now, Dr. J let it play. Yeah. So I feel like I have a song that fit the occasion, you know? Ah, yes. Yeah, watch it now. So, yeah, man, you can turn on the phone and turn it by yourself and everything, because that song is for you today. All of all these big up. Say I'm a winner. You know that I am, mama. If you collect all right to the more, I say raise your hand. And so we can, all right. See, oh, but that's all there. All right, over there. So, hey, you want to tell them, so we're winning right now, say we. When you say winning right now, but we forget the trophy to what we're living right now. Hey, I tell you winning right now, yeah, you can just singing right now. So what? When you say winning right now, a Thanksgiving right now, yeah. I'll sing a part of it. All about it, sing a part of it. Say I'm with. Oh, wait them when you say. And don't let them when you say you winning. Hey, watch out now. Listen me now, it say I'm a walking W. Learn from the L's. We turn them in a medals in a trophy and belts. And every day you see we with the on the next level. We break records like we cracking eggshells. Every single ounce of effort we expel. It's all about progress, so we have to excel. So watch them looking like success, they dress well. Another knockout for them ring the next bell. We are about to send the haters a call to get well, because them sick of it. Them see you collect your award and them sick of it. But that's the young gist of it. Say you're hating at the duty cause winning now we have it. So one more time, say oh I want to hear you massive say. If you're happy for them, sing it loud, sing it. Oh say them winning. Class, oh, hey see you now. Hey Jamaica massive, go and tell them. Say we're winning right now. When? I will forget the trophy to what we living right now. Tell them we're winning right now, yeah. And we're chilling right now. King's Coastland, we're winning right now. What? A Thanksgiving right now, yeah. See my favorite part of every day you see we are the reigning champ. And the cloud with the silver line we reigning from. If you see some of the places where we hailing from, it's also the type of places should be failing from. But now we're winning. Yes, every quarter, every inning, and I hope you listen keenly to the words and that I'm singing now. You know that there's no giving in no matter the circumstances we're living in. So one more time, say. One more time, say. Yeah, man. Oh, make them hear you say I'm winning. Ah, yes. Yeah, man, you can rock out one apart. And tell them, say what? Say we're winning, right? Lord. Oh, yes, you're winning right now, but we forget the trophy to what we're living right now. One more time, say. All right, pull up. Remember, say, it's not a whole long performance or nothing. We can't sing one more song for you if you know what. Because remember when people dress up in them nice clothes over King's House and them things, they know. You know what I will sing one more? At least one more? How am I going to sing for them, Dr. Dre? If you're happy for all the awardees, raise your hand, so. Yes, because guess what, you know? It's one thing to receive something yourself and be happy for it, but it's a totally different energy if you see somebody get something and glad for them, like real glad, you know. Yeah, man, clean out. That's what I promote. So let's see right about now. The clean out people. The part of them, if your heart don't clean, please don't sing. Let's go. Turn it up, Jay. So right about now, Remy and don't do that song. If you know the song, you can't sing Remy and part. You ready? The song said, say what? When I see my friends become my enemies, say, I ask them. Sing the man. Said I know. So what? Said that. When you don't try to win it, what's a man doing? That's an awesome deal. You can't go out to my kitchen. So what? Said I know. And yes, we know. When all this shall peace of life, and they shall show only. Play my level 3. Now go to a verse. Watch out for people. In a life, you have to watch out for people. Yeah, them say watch out for wolf in a sheep clothing, but me tell you watch out for the sheep too. Worse than the wolf them. No for them are evil. All who you just help. Claim them no need you. Yes, people always say if you watch out for fake things sometime. Careful of fake family to one woman say what? Say dirty ya. We not hear them. They can't blue one and they shall show up. Said I know, oh yes we know. Tell them we know. Take it back to church. Give thanks. My name is Agent Sasko. Before I go there, I have to bless everybody one more time. I want to say enough respect to all the generals. Oh God, big up yourself, enough respect. One more. What? No, here I them me I sing for today. Want to say one more? Dr. J, let it play. All right about now. You know the good anthem, you know what the anthem say? The first 2 words of the anthem say what? Say what? The Almighty shall protect me, so the Lord will not forsake me. Say Jana. So when some dirty man a lick up, we no care if they make me. What? Oh my God, now forsake me. Say Jana. Alright, all of these, the first half you, turn it up, Dr. J. It says, me say them want to be beer things, them know them can't. Can't do me nothing cause I know sound the chant. The Lord Jamaica beat the blessing cause of good deeds of plans. He make it beat to life by the still waters. But I protect me from all perils and disasters. Yeah, though we are walk through the valley of the shadow of death. No time we don't fret cause Jah will protect me. So the Lord will not forsake me. Say Jana. One more time I'm gonna tell you, we no care if they make me. Say what? Oh my God, now forsake me. Say Jana. In the way they make a pray then. Oh yes, we call upon the Father in the time of trouble. We call upon the Father because he rough in the struggle, but although things sticky, we keep a pride. And the Lord provides, so we pot always a bubble. Stay by we side and no leave we alone. Him always dead, y'all in the war zone. He make David slew Goliath with a sling and a stone. Yes, Jamaican massive, I love you to the bone. The Almighty, I protect me. So the Lord will not forsake me. I say, Jannah. Don't make me suffer. Love and respect. Enjoy the rest of the proceedings. Big respect. Blessings.
That's Agent Sasko for you. Give him another round of applause. Thank you, Agent Sasko. And as we continue with the handing out of awards to our recipients, I'd like to introduce to you the Honorable Marcia Smith, MP, Minister of State, Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Welcome her handsomely for me, please. And also Mr. Giovanni Blair.
Announcing recipients from the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. Mrs. Donna Marie Anderson Patterson. Mrs. Zena Barnaby Lewis. Miss Julia Patricia Ball. Mr. Gary Anthony Bernard. Ms. Ramona Tamara Bernard. Mrs. Donna Elaine Bernard Lindsay. Mrs. Jennifer Anne-Marie Brown Cunningham. Mrs. Janelle Natasha Campbell. Mrs. Raquel July Campbell. Miss Anna K. Maria Clark. Mr. David Clark. Mrs. Tisha Debrica Clark Griffiths. Miss Angela Clennon. Mrs. Sharika Millicent Query Ragbear. Mrs. Marion Anika Aikida Davidson Hall. Miss Desreen Ann Patrice Douglas. Miss Ethelyn Udell Douglas. Miss Lorene Alberta Edwards. Mr. Orette Fabian Ellison. Mrs. Debbie Anne-Marie Evering Price. Mrs. Mavis Farquharson. Miss Anne-Marie Ferriman. Mr. Silbert Valentine Fisher. Mrs. Elaine Gardner Gabriel. Miss Marlene Elizabeth Gray. Miss Angela Patricia Hamilton. Mr. Craig Anthony Henry. Mrs. Paulette Down Holness. Miss Latoya Jackson. Miss Yasmin Elaine Jackson. Miss Melisha Denise Johnson. Miss Sheila Yvonne King. Mr. Cyprian Equency Lewis. Miss Keisha Natasha Lewis. Mr. Woodville Lewis. Miss Paula Rosemary Lynch. Mrs. Vanderlyn McLegon. Mr. Wayne Clyde Mitchell. Miss Cheryl Dawn Morgan. Mrs. Ava Marie Murdoch. Mrs. Lisa Teddy Nelson. Miss Ingrid Palmer. Mrs. Georgia Cecilia Palmer Wilson. Miss Angela Jennifer Peterson Cole. Miss Marvelyn Rose Pitter. Mrs. Arlene Amoy Powell Foster. Mr. Lancelot Lloyd Robinson. Mrs. Donna May Rowe Manning. Mr. Moshe Antonov Samora Simpson. Miss Yvonne Beverly Spence. Mr. Dennis Kevin Spencer. Mrs. Sharon Yvonne Stewart Johnson. Mrs. Joan Pamela Stone Spence. Mrs. Maxine Margarita Taylor Young. Mr. Ezekiel Mark Thompson. The late Jennifer Angela Thomas. The medal will be received by her daughter, Miss Bianca Thompson. Mrs. Paulette Joy Thompson Forrester. Miss Marlette Tamara Wellington. Mr. Carlton Vernal White. All right. Miss Lola Jacqueline Williams. Miss Glenna Angela Wilson. Miss Celine Anne-Marie Winter. The following recipients are from the Ministry of National Security. Miss Daphne Elaine Chambers. Miss Anne Davis. Miss Yuleen McQueen. Miss Patricia Anne-Marie Williams. Miss Topaz Meek Bailey. Miss Heather Nelson. Miss Patrice Sadler. Miss Tricia Anne-Marie Williams. The following recipients are from the Ministry of National Security, Jamaica Defense Force. Mr. Lindale Bailey. Mrs. Marvelyn Elizabeth Barnaby. Mr. Greg Orlando Brooks. Mr. David Anthony Clark. Mr. John Clark. Miss Simone Stacian Connell. Mr. Aston George Darien. Mrs. Simone Foster. Miss Audrey Rosemary Hall. Mr. Ian Hamilton. Mr. Dean Philip Hunter. Mr. Oral Lloyd. Mr. Richard McFarlane. Mr. Lloyd Reed. Mr. McFarlane. Mr. Christopher Mitchell. Miss Patricia Mitchell. Miss Carleen Anne-Marie Myers. Mr. Lloyd Reed. Miss Corleen Robe. Miss Janet Robe. Miss Frances Anne Marie Elaine Sims. Mr. Fitzroy Smith. Mr. No. Mr. Oral Reed. That's not Mr. Reed. Mr. Timothy Anthony Surf. Mrs. Annette Venice Wedderburn Faulkner. Miss Heather Williams. Miss Judith Yvonne Tucker. That's one. Oh, no. 44.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a nice round of applause to Minister Smith? Thank you very much, Madam, and thank you, Mr. Blair. As we continue with the awards, I'm going to be inviting Ambassador the Honorable Douglas Saunders, OJCD JP, Cabinet Secretary and Head of the Public Service, to come forward to assist us with the handing out of these awards. These recipients are from the Ministry of National Security, the Police Department. First recipient, Mrs. Shireen Sue-Ann Butuo. Mrs. Winsome Janet Bo Robinson. Mr. Alfonso Alonso Beckford. Mrs. Nadine Andrea Branford Bryce. Mrs. Maxine Adassa Brown-Dixon. Next recipient, Miss Marsha Yolanda Bryan. Miss Marlene Vivia Clark. Mr. Vinell Clark. Mr. Gary Anthony Daly. Followed by Mrs. Garcia Elizabeth Denny Duncan. The late Dorrit Viola Dillon, the medal will be collected by her daughter, Miss Tarshia Windett. Mr. Paul Andrew Dunkley. Ms. Sharon Marcia Dwyer. Mr. Richard Fitzroy Forsyth. Miss Tanya Francis. Mrs. Nethlin Gale Smith. Miss Marlene Monaline Graham. Miss Joan Christine Graham. Miss Evadne Gray. Miss Norma Albertha Green. Mr. Richard Dwight Gregory. Miss Marjorie Angela Harris. Miss Christine Maxine Herban Wright. Mrs. Perline Merhenta Haas Bignall. Dr. George Anthony Leverage. Mrs. Rashika Elizabeth Levy Bonney. There's no prince there. There's no prince there. Tell them to write the name. No, we can't go all the way back. No prince there. Mr. Prince George Hibbert. So where are we at now? Please pardon the delay. Mrs. Patrina Roberta Hudson McIntyre. Miss Jean Ann Lowe. Miss Sharon McLaren. Mrs. Georgette Janice Mendez Robinson. Mr. Fidel Miller. Miss E. Anne-Marie Moore. Mr. Devon James Robinson. Mrs. Aquila Pauline Savory Carby. Mr. Conrad Antonio Seeley. Mr. Errol Joseph Shaw. Miss Sophia Anne-Marie Small. Mr. Simeon Anthony Stewart. Miss Lorraine Elizabeth Taylor. Mrs. Paulette Winifred Taylor Parker. Mr. Kelvin Thomas. Mrs. Nicole Thompson-Farron. Miss Winsome Jennifer Walker. Miss Marcia Williams Stevens. The next set of recipients from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Mrs. Pauline Fonseca Fletcher-Letman. Mr. Hopton Oliver Williams. Miss Pauline Fonseca Fletcher-Letman. Not here. Miss Georgia May Austin. Mr. Richard Wayne Hilton. Mr. Vivian Lloyd Mitchell. Mr. Steve O'Neill Thomas. Those recipients were from the Ministry of Transport and Mining. Give them another special round of applause, please. Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Thank you so much. We're just about coming to the end of the ceremony for the presentation of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards. We extend gratitude to His Excellency, the Governor General, the Prime Minister, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, the Honorable Marcia Smith, Ambassador the Honorable Douglas Saunders, Mr. O'Neill Grant, and the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards for their gracious participation in this ceremony. Our special appreciation to the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band and the JCF ceremonial team. We thank to Agent Sasco, Mrs. Nigen Brown, and Mr. Delroy Nelson. Thank you. Give them a round of applause for their musical contributions. We also take the opportunity to acknowledge the critical support of the participating members of the Interministerial Planning Committee, without whom the ceremony would not have been possible. But recipients, today we celebrate you. On behalf of a grateful nation, We thank you for your service. And keep that applause going for the constabulary band as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you now to stand for the singing of our national anthem.
Eternal Father, bless our land. Guide us with thy mighty hand. Keep us free from evil powers. Be our light through countless hours. To our leaders, great defender, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica land we love. Jamaica, Jamaica, Jamaica land we love. Teach us true respect for all. Stir response to duty's call. Strengthen us, the weak to cherish. Give us vision, lest we perish. Knowledge send us, Heavenly Father, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica land we love. Jamaica, Jamaica,
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It has been our pleasure. We'd also like to thank Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson and Mr. Siobhan Blair. Please remain standing for the departure of His Excellency, the Governor General and the Most Honorable Prime Minister. We will also be seeing the departure of Dr. Angela Brown Burke, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, MP, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Marcia Smith, MP, Minister of State, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Ambassador the Honorable Douglas O'Rain, OJCD, JP, Cabinet Secretary, the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards, President of the Jamaica Council of Churches, and of course, without him, Mr. O'Neill Grant, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for participating. We congratulate you. Take the opportunity to wish you the best for the upcoming season. And on behalf of my co-anchors, I'm Norma Brown.